There are some moments in life that stay with you forever, not because they were grand or loud, but because they were quiet, so quiet that you almost miss the way they changed you. For me, that moment came on an ordinary evening, a slow, simple evening where nothing seemed special. I was standing in my kitchen, washing the last few dishes after dinner. The water was warm, the house was peaceful, and for the first time in years, I actually felt calm. My son was sitting at the table behind me. He was tapping a pencil, working on something he didn't want me to see. I assumed it was a school project or maybe a drawing. He had always been quiet, always someone who kept his feelings tucked inside like a folded letter, and I was used to giving more than receiving. I had spent years being the strong one, the steady one, the one who held everything together even when I felt myself breaking on the inside. That evening felt no different. Until he spoke, his voice was soft, not shaky, not excited, just soft. Like he had been holding the words inside for far too long. "Mom," he said. I turned a little, drying my hands on a towel. "Yes?" I replied, expecting another question about homework, or maybe a request for a snack, but it wasn't that. He stood up from his chair, walked toward me with slow steps, and placed a folded paper on the counter beside me. "I made this for you," he whispered. I smiled, thinking it was another drawing of a house or a tree or our dog, but when I opened it and read the first sentence, my hand stopped moving, my heart stopped moving. Inside the paper, written in letters far too honest for a child, were the words, "Mom, you are the only person I feel safe with." And in that single moment, everything inside me melted. All the walls, all the heaviness, all the quiet pain I had learned to carry so well. He didn't say it because I was perfect. He didn't say it because I had never failed. He said it because, in his small world, I was the one place he didn't have to pretend. I didn't cry right away. I just stood there holding the paper, realizing how often we move through life without knowing what we mean to the people we love most. That one sentence became the doorway to a story I never expected to share. A story about distance, silence, childhood, motherhood, and the quiet love that grows even in the places where words don't reach. And this is that story. I grew up believing that love had to be loud to be real. Arguments, celebrations, busy rooms filled with people talking over each other. Those were the things I recognized as family. But life has a gentle way of teaching you that love can also be quiet, so quiet that you might not notice it unless you're paying attention. When my son Aaron was born, I remember holding him in the hospital room. The nurse had just placed him in my arms, and he opened his tiny eyes like he was searching for something familiar. I whispered, "I'm here. I promise I'm here." Even though I was terrified of whether I could truly keep that promise, motherhood wasn't easy for me, not because I didn't love him. I loved him more than I thought a heart could stretch, but because I was alone more often than I expected. My husband traveled for work, sometimes for weeks at a time. I didn't blame him, but I felt the weight of it every single day, every feeding, every fever, every silent night when I sat awake just listening to Aaron breathe, because I was scared to fall asleep. As he grew older, he stayed soft, a gentle child, the kind of child who watched more than he spoke, the kind who felt everything deeply but never said much about it. Some people mistook that for weakness. I never did. I saw myself in him. The quietness, the sensitivity, the way he always tried to carry his own feelings, so others didn't have to worry. We spent years building our own little world, a world of simple routines, morning cereal, school drop-offs, bedtime stories, a world where I tried my best to make him feel loved, even when I doubted myself every step of the way. But somewhere in those years, something shifted, slowly, quietly, like sand slipping through your fingers. He grew distant, not in a rebellious way, just quieter than usual. He would sit at the dinner table with his fork in his hand, looking at his plate but not really seeing it. He stopped telling me about his day, stopped bringing me his little drawings, stopped climbing into my room when thunderstorms scared him at night. At first I thought it was normal. Children grow, they change, they learn to hold their emotions closer to their chest. But there was something else, a heaviness in his eyes, a silence that didn't feel like childhood anymore. I would ask, "Aaron, is everything okay?" And he would nod, "Yes, Mom," even though his voice sounded far away. Those were the days I began to question myself. Was I doing enough? Was I saying the right things? Was he pulling away because of something I did or didn't do? The house felt different too, quiet, even when it wasn't supposed to be. I remember one evening especially. He was around 9 years old. He sat at the living room window watching the rain fall outside. The sky was gray, the wind soft, and the sound of the rain created a peaceful kind of sadness in the room. I walked over and sat beside him. "You've been quiet lately," I said gently. He shrugged. I waited, hoping he would say something more. He didn't. We just watched the rain together, side by side, two silhouettes in the dim room, connected by silence and something unspoken. I didn't push him. I didn't want to force his feelings out of him like pulling clothes from a drawer. So I stayed there, just breathing with him, hoping he knew that I was trying. Years passed like that. Moments of closeness, moments of distance. He grew into a thoughtful, introspective boy, the kind who apologized even when he didn't do anything wrong. And I loved him through all of it, even in the moments when I felt helpless, even in the moments when I wished he would just tell me what was weighing on his heart. Little did I know, one evening, in the most ordinary moment, he would finally say something that would melt my heart forever and show me everything he had been carrying alone. Life has a way of changing without asking for permission. Sometimes the change is loud, but sometimes it arrives like a soft shadow, slipping into the corners of your home before you even notice it. For us, the change began slowly. When Aaron turned 10, he stopped sitting beside me during dinner. He would choose the chair across the table instead, not out of disrespect, but as if he was trying to create a little distance that neither of us knew how to talk about. He still ate quietly, still listened when I spoke, but something in his energy had shifted. He wasn't restless or rude, just far away. I would ask him about school. He would answer with short lines. It was fine, it was okay, nothing much. He had always been a quiet child, yes, but this silence felt different, like he was hiding something inside himself and layering it with careful, practiced calmness. I tried not to overthink it, but every night when I lay down to sleep, the silence replayed in my mind like a lullaby with no melody. The first small cracks. There were tiny moments that built up over time. One afternoon I saw him sitting alone on the school bench, while all the other children played around him. He was looking at the ground, his hands tucked under his legs. His shoulders looked too heavy for a boy his age. I waved at him. He forced a small smile, not a real one, a smile made of politeness, not happiness. Another day he came home later than usual. I waited by the window, watching the street with growing concern. When he finally walked in, I asked gently, "Everything okay?" He nodded and rushed to his room. I didn't follow. I stood there for a moment, feeling like a guest in my own child's life, dialogue that revealed nothing, yet everything. A few weeks later, we had a tiny conversation. That stayed with me more than I expected. I was folding laundry in the living room. When he walked in and sat quietly on the rug near my feet, he didn't say anything, he just sat there. After a moment I asked, "Do you want to talk about something?" He shook his head. "Are you sure?" This time he nodded, but the nod was too quick, like he wanted to end the conversation before it began. I looked at him for a long moment, studying his face, his lowered eyes, his still hands, the calmness that felt practiced rather than natural. "Aaron," I said softly, "you don't have to hide anything from me." He didn't look up. He just whispered, "I know." And that was all. It wasn't what he said, but how he said it. That made my chest tighten with worry. School meeting. A few months later, his teacher called me in for a meeting. She was a kind woman, gentle in her words, but her expression carried concern. She said, "Aaron is very bright, very polite, but he seems emotionally withdrawn." I felt something inside me tremble. She continued, "He works alone. He rarely speaks. He seems anxious during group activities. Is everything okay at home?" I tried to smile, but guilt sits heavily on a mother's shoulders, even when she's doing everything she can. "Yes," I said softly. "Home is fine. He's just quiet." But that wasn't true, and I knew it. He wasn't just quiet. He was carrying something he didn't know how to share. The teacher placed a gentle hand over mine. "Children his age don't withdraw without a reason. Watch him closely. Sometimes they speak through silence." Her words played in my mind for weeks. The birthday that broke me a little. When Aaron turned 11, I planned a small birthday gathering for him. Nothing big, just a cake, balloons, and a few children from the neighborhood. He sat quietly while everyone sang for him. He smiled at the right moments. He said thank you when people gave him gifts, but the moment everyone left, his smile faded like it had never existed. He went to his room, closed the door gently, and stayed there until dinner. When I knocked and asked, "Can I come in?" he said, "Maybe later, Mom." Not rude, not angry, just distant. I walked back to the living room, sat on the couch with my hands in my lap, and felt tears rise to my eyes. I didn't cry loudly, I just let them fall silently, because sometimes motherhood feels like loving someone whose heart you can't always reach. The Notebook. One evening, as I was cleaning his room, I found a notebook under his pillow. I didn't plan to read it, I was only going to move it aside, but when it slipped open, I saw a small line written in a child's handwriting. "I don't want to upset Mom, so I keep things to myself." My breath caught, my eyes blurred. He wasn't pulling away because he didn't care, he was pulling away because he cared too much. He didn't want to worry me. Didn't want to add to my load, didn't want to be the reason I felt sad. I sat on the edge of his bed, holding that notebook to my chest, and whispered into the empty room. "Oh, sweetheart, you never upset me. Your silence hurts more." I didn't tell him I found it. I didn't want him to feel exposed. But after that day, I watched him even more closely, the way he walked, the way he smiled, the way he avoided looking at me when something was bothering him, a shift at home. Around this time, my husband started traveling even more for work. Some nights he returned late, too tired to talk. Other nights he didn't return at all. Aaron noticed. Children always notice. One night he asked me quietly, "Is Dad okay?" I nodded. "He's fine, just busy." "He's always busy," he whispered. There was no anger in his voice, just a quiet disappointment that he didn't want anyone else to hear. I wanted to comfort him, but I didn't know how to explain that sometimes adults love their family and still struggle to show it, so I told him, "He loves you, he just has a lot on his plate." Aaron nodded, but he didn't look convinced. That night I watched him sleep, his hands tucked under his cheek, his breathing slow and soft. I wanted to wrap my arms around him and tell him that he was enough, that he never had to earn love, that he didn't have to be perfect or quiet or strong to be worthy of care, but I didn't wake him. I just sat there, hoping he would feel it somehow the day he closed his door. One moment stood out more than the rest. I was preparing dinner when I heard him come home from school. He walked to his room, and for the first time in his life, he closed the door, not halfway, not gently, all the way, closed. It was a simple action, but it felt like someone had knocked the air out of my chest. I placed the spoon down, wiped my hands, and walked to his door. I knocked softly. "Aaron?" No answer. "Aaron, sweetheart, can I come in?" Still no answer. I leaned my forehead against the door, feeling the cool surface under my skin. "I'm here if you need me," I whispered. After a few seconds, I heard him shuffle inside, then a quiet, "I know, Mom." Those words were gentle, but the distance in them felt like a storm. I walked back to the kitchen, my heart heavier than before, the things he never said. The months that followed were filled with small, painful patterns. He stopped asking for help with homework, stopped telling me about his friends, stopped leaving his bedroom door open when he played. Sometimes I would peek in and see him staring at the wall, lost in thoughts deeper than his age should carry. I tried to reach him in small ways, packing his lunch with notes, leaving his favorite snacks on his desk, sitting beside him during TV shows, even when he barely looked up, but each gesture felt like tapping on a soundproof glass wall, while he sat on the other side, unable to hear me, the misunderstanding that hurt us both. One night after dinner, I told him I noticed he was quieter recently, and asked if there was anything I could do. He looked up and said in the softest voice, "You're doing too much already." I frowned. "Too much?" He nodded. "You're always tired. I don't want to make things harder." I felt my heart twist painfully. "You never make things harder," I told him, but he just shrugged, and the conversation ended there. That night I lay awake for hours, thinking about how children try to protect their parents long before they understand that love doesn't work that way. The growing gap. By the time he turned 12, the distance between us felt like a hallway. That kept stretching longer and longer. No matter how many steps I took toward him, I still cooked his favorite meals, still checked on him at night, still tried to start little conversations, but he answered in short sentences, polite but distant. He wasn't angry, he wasn't rebellious, he was just drifting, and I didn't know how to stop him. Little did I know, the moment that changed everything was slowly making its way toward us, a moment that would melt my heart, break it a little, and piece it back together, in the most unexpected way. There are moments in life when the smallest sound, the smallest gesture, can feel louder than any shout. For me, the turning point began on a quiet Saturday morning. The sky outside was pale gray, the kind of soft, sleepy weather that makes you want to stay inside. I was in the kitchen making breakfast, just simple eggs and toast, when I noticed Aaron had not come downstairs yet. Usually, even on his quietest days, he would be up by then. He wasn't a child who liked sleeping late. I wiped my hands on a towel and made my way to his room. The door was half closed. A bad sign by now. I knocked gently. "Aaron, you awake?" No response. I pushed the door a little and peeked in. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, his back hunched slightly, his hands gripping the sides of the mattress, like he was trying to keep himself from falling off the world. My heart tightened. "Aaron?" I stepped inside slowly. "Is everything okay?" He didn't look at me. He just kept staring at the floor, as if the answers he needed were written on the carpet. I sat beside him, not too close. Close enough that he could feel my presence. Not close enough to overwhelm him. "What's going on?" I asked softly. He swallowed hard. I heard the tiny sound in his throat. That reminded me he was still just a boy with feelings too big for his small body. After a long silence, he whispered, "Mom, I don't know how to talk to you." My breath caught, not because of the words themselves, but because of the pain behind them. "I'm right here," I said gently. "You don't have to say anything perfectly, just talk to me." He shook his head, and a tiny tear slipped down his cheek. "I don't want you to worry," he murmured. That sentence. It was the same one I'd read in his notebook months before. The same one that felt like a quiet scream. I tried to breathe normally, but something inside me cracked open. "Aaron," I whispered, "I worry when you don't talk to me, not when you do." Still, he kept staring at the floor. I reached for his hand slowly. He didn't pull away, but he didn't hold on either, trying to hide the tears like they were something shameful. "I'm not strong like you," he whispered. I felt my heart twist painfully because he didn't know, he couldn't possibly know, how many nights I had silently cried, how many times I had broken down behind closed doors, because motherhood sometimes felt like running a race without knowing the finish line. "Aaron," I said with a trembling voice, "I'm not strong all the time." He finally looked up. His eyes were red, filled with confusion and fear and something softer, a longing to understand. "You're always okay," he said. "You never cry. You never say you're sad. You never fall apart." I let out a quiet, painful breath. "I do," I whispered. "I just don't want you to see it." He blinked, his lips parted slightly. As if my words didn't match the image he carried of me, I took his hand again, this time holding it firmly. "I try to be strong so you feel safe," I said. "But that doesn't mean I never hurt. It doesn't mean I don't need you too." He looked at me with a deep ache in his eyes, like someone who had been carrying a secret belief that he wasn't enough. "Do you need me, Mom?" he asked quietly, as if the question itself was a risk. I felt tears rising, but I didn't let them fall yet. "Of course I do," I said. "You're my son, you're my heart walking outside my body. I always need you." His chin trembled, his breathing grew uneven, and then in the smallest, most fragile voice he whispered, "Then why don't you tell me? Why don't you ever let me see when you're sad?" I closed my eyes for a moment because the truth was sharp, and it cut deep. "Because," I said softly, "I didn't want you to feel responsible for my feelings." "But I feel responsible anyway," he whispered. Those words hit me like a wave, gentle but overwhelming. I wrapped my arms around him slowly, giving him time to pull away if he wanted to. He didn't pull away. He leaned into me, his small body shaking with quiet tears, and I held him, feeling every tremor, every breath, every bit of pain he had been hiding for years. "I'm here," I murmured. "You don't have to carry anything alone. Not fear, not sadness, not confusion. You never have to be alone inside your feelings." His hands finally clutched my shirt, a desperate, childlike grip that told me he had been waiting for this moment of being held. We stayed like that for a long time, minutes, hours. I couldn't tell. Time moved differently when a child opens their heart. When he finally spoke again, his voice was quieter than a whisper. "Mom, there's something I want to tell you." I pulled back gently so I could see his face. "What is it?" I asked. He took a deep breath, one of those breaths children take when they gather courage from some small trembling place inside themselves, and he said, "I didn't know if you loved me, or if you were just being strong because you had to." Those words shattered something inside me, not in a painful way, but in a way that forced me to see just how deeply he had been struggling. I reached for his face, cupping his cheeks gently. "Aaron," I whispered with all the softness in me, "I love you more than anything, not because I have to, because I want to, because you're my son, and you are the best part of my life." His eyes filled again, but this time the tears carried relief. Instead of confusion, he leaned his forehead against mine and whispered, "I didn't know, I really didn't know." And that was the moment. Everything began to change. His words stayed in the air between us, gentle but heavy, like a soft rain that you can feel on your skin long before you see it. I held his face in my hands for a moment longer, trying to understand how long he had been carrying this fear inside him. "Aaron," I said softly, "what made you feel that way? Tell me, sweetheart, I'm listening." He sniffed, wiped his nose with the back of his hand, and looked down again. It took him a few seconds before he whispered, "You never look sad. You never look tired. You always act like everything is okay, even when it isn't, so I thought maybe you didn't need me, or maybe I wasn't important enough to make you feel anything." My heart cracked so quietly, I could feel the sound only inside me. I took a slow breath and said, "Sweetheart, adults don't show everything they feel. Sometimes we hide things because we want to protect the people we love." His voice trembled. "But when you hide everything, it makes me think I shouldn't talk about my feelings either." That one sentence felt like a mirror held up to my entire life. He wasn't wrong. He had learned silence from me. He had learned composure from me. He had learned how to tuck his emotions away. Because he saw me doing it every single day. I thought I was being strong for him, but in his eyes I was building a wall. He didn't know how to climb. I gently brushed his hair back from his forehead. "You're not supposed to hide," I whispered. "You're supposed to talk to me, cry with me, share things with me. You're allowed to feel. You're allowed to fall apart." He closed his eyes and leaned into my hand, as if the simple touch was something he had been craving. For far too long, after a long silence, he took a shaky breath and said something that I would remember for the rest of my life. "Mom, I get scared a lot." I moved a little closer. "What kind of scared?" He shrugged, but the gesture wasn't careless. It was uncertain, fragile. "I don't know," he said. "Just scared, like something bad will happen, like I'll do something wrong, or I'll disappoint you, or Dad will get mad, or you'll get tired of me." I felt the breath leave my body. "Tired of you?" I repeated softly. "Never." He blinked, the tears in his eyes shimmered like small lights that had been waiting years to be seen. "I don't know why I feel like that," he said. "I just do. Sometimes it's heavy. Sometimes it's so heavy I don't want to talk. I don't want to move. I just sit alone because I don't want anyone to see me like that." I wanted to pull him into my arms, but I waited. I didn't want to smother him when he was trying to open up. "Aaron," I said quietly, "you never have to hide the heavy things from me. If you're scared, tell me. If you're sad, tell me. If you feel small or lonely or confused, tell me. I want to know. I want to carry it with you." His voice cracked as he whispered, "I didn't want to be a burden." That sentence broke me more than anything else, not loudly, but in a deep, silent way. That made me realize how easy it is for a child to misunderstand love. "You could never be a burden," I said. "You are my child. You are my responsibility, my joy, my heart. You are never too much, and you never will be." He took a shaky breath, and a single tear rolled down his cheek. This time he didn't wipe it away. Slowly he leaned forward, until his forehead touched my shoulder. I felt his small hands rest lightly on my arms, as if he wasn't sure whether he was allowed to hold on too tightly. I wrapped my arms around him. In the gentlest hug I could give. We stayed like that for a long, long time. A mother holding her son, while both of them realized how much they had been hiding from each other, all in the name of strength. After a while, he whispered something into my shoulder. The words were soft, but clear enough to melt me completely. "Mom, I didn't know you needed me too." I closed my eyes and whispered, "I do, I always have." He pulled back just enough to look at me. His eyes held something different now, not fear, not confusion, but a fragile understanding. "Then why do you pretend to be strong all the time?" he asked. I took a breath. Not carefully, but with the whole weight of a child who finally felt safe. His arms wrapped around my waist, his cheek rested against my chest, his breathing steadied in a slow rhythm. In that moment, I felt something shift, not just in him, but in both of us. The walls began to crumble, the distance began to shrink, the silence began to loosen its grip, and for the first time in a long time, my son allowed himself to be held, not because he was scared, but because he knew, truly knew, he didn't have to pretend anymore. The days that followed felt different in a way I didn't expect, not dramatic, not sudden, just gently different, like the slow brightening of the sky before sunrise, the kind of change you only notice if you stand still long enough to feel it. Aaron wasn't suddenly talkative or open. He didn't wake up the next morning ready to pour his heart out. That's not how healing works. But small things, tiny things, began to shift. For the first time in years, I heard him humming while brushing his teeth. A small, quiet sound, but it filled the hallway with something warm. At breakfast, he sat a little closer than he used to. Not right beside me, but not far away either. A comfortable in-between. When he left for school, he paused for just half a second and said, "Bye, Mom," in a voice that sounded gentle instead of distant. These were small signs, but to me they felt like miracles. The art assignment. A week later he came home holding a folded piece of paper. He handed it to me without saying anything. For a moment, I wondered if it was another note, like the one that melted my heart weeks earlier, but when I opened it, I realized it was a drawing. A simple sketch of a small house, with one window glowing softly in the night. Underneath, in his neat handwriting, he wrote, "The safe place." I looked up at him. "Is this our house?" I asked softly. He nodded. "And the window?" I asked again. He pressed his lips together, then whispered, "That's you." I felt my vision blur. "You're my safe place," he said, barely audible. I knelt down and hugged him gently, not wanting to overwhelm him, but wanting him to feel every ounce of love I had held inside for him. "You're my safe place too," I whispered back. He closed his eyes and stayed in my arms, longer than he normally would, and that moment, quiet and small and fragile, felt like a piece of healing stitching itself. Between us, a slow rebuilding. In the weeks that followed, we rebuilt our bond one gentle step at a time. After school, he started sitting in the living room again, not talking much, but simply being near me. Like he was reminding himself that closeness was allowed. Some evenings, he'd hand me his homework and say, "Can you check this, Mom?" His voice carried a softness that made my heart ache with gratitude. At night, he no longer closed his door tightly. He kept it slightly open. A silent invitation. A sign that he wasn't trying to hide anymore, and every now and then, he would come sit beside me on the couch, leaning quietly against my side, in a gesture that said more than any long conversation could. These moments reminded me that children don't need perfection. They need presence. They need a place to land when their small hearts feel too heavy. The quiet question he finally asked. One evening, as I cooked dinner, he stood beside me quietly. He watched me stir the pot, watched the steam rise, watched my face like he was searching for something. After a moment, he asked, "Mom, do you ever get scared too?" I nodded. "All the time." He blinked. "You do?" "Yes," I said. "Being an adult doesn't mean I stop feeling things. It just means I've learned to hide some of them." He looked down, his fingers tracing the pattern on the kitchen counter. "You don't have to hide them from me," he whispered. The words hit me softly, like a gentle truth I hadn't realized I was waiting for. "I'll try not to," I said. He nodded once, a small but meaningful gesture. Then, after a moment, he said something that surprised me. "Can I tell you something, even if it sounds silly?" I turned off the stove, faced him fully, and said, "You can tell me anything." He took a slow breath, the kind a child takes when they're about to reveal something precious. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "I think things in my head that scare me, not because they're real, but because I don't know how to stop them." My heart softened. "What kind of things?" He shrugged. "What if something bad happens to you, or if I make a mistake, or if people don't like me, or if Dad doesn't come home, or if one day you get tired of me?" I placed both my hands on his shoulders gently. "Aaron," I whispered, "fears don't make you weak. They just make you human, and you're allowed to share every single fear you have with me, always." He looked at me with eyes that seemed older than his years. "What if I can't stop being scared?" I smiled softly, a small, warm smile, meant only for him. "Then we'll face it together, one day at a time, one feeling at a time. You're not alone in this." He exhaled, and for the first time, I saw a small piece of worry lift off his shoulders. A new ritual. That night marked the start of a new ritual before bed. We sat together for a few minutes and talked about our day, not deeply, not dramatically, just simple, gentle sharing. He would tell me one thing he felt, even if it was small. I felt nervous in class. I felt happy during art. I felt lonely at lunch. I felt okay today. And I shared too, not everything, but enough for him to know that adults also carried emotions that didn't always fit neatly inside their hearts. I felt tired today. I felt worried this morning. I felt grateful tonight. I felt proud of you. These small exchanges became threads binding us. Closer and closer again. The day he smiled without hiding it. One afternoon after school, I saw him walking toward me. With a real smile, not a polite one, not a guarded one, but a genuine smile, that reached his eyes. "Mom," he called out, running the last few steps. The sound of his voice filled something inside me that had been empty for years. "Guess what?" he said, out of breath. "What?" I showed my drawing to my teacher, the one of the house. She said it was beautiful. "That's wonderful," I said, touching his hair gently. And I told her it was my safe place. I looked at him, and the emotion in his eyes was no longer fear. It was pride. Pride in himself, pride in being understood, pride in knowing he didn't have to hide anymore. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat by his bedside for a while. I watched his chest rise and fall with the steady rhythm of sleep. It felt like watching a small boat gently rock on calm water. I whispered a prayer of thanks, not the loud kind, but the quiet kind that lives in your bones. The days after that grew softer. Not every day was perfect. Sometimes old fears returned like small storms. He would have a day when he retreated again, or I would find him staring at the wall, lost in thought. But each time, the gap between us felt smaller than before. We began to share more than just small daily things. One afternoon, he brought home a school project about family stories. He asked if I would tell him one of mine. I sat with him at the kitchen table and told him about my childhood, about the small house I grew up in, about my mother humming while she cooked, about the first time I felt brave. He listened with his whole face turned towards me, eyes wide and soft. When I finished, he told me something I never expected. "Mom, I like hearing your stories. They make me feel close to you." Those words felt like a warm blanket on a cold night. They weren't flashy or loud, they were steady and true. My husband noticed too. When he came home, he saw the way Aaron kept his door slightly open, the way he left his homework out on the table, the way he sometimes sat quietly while we watched TV. One evening after dinner, my husband sat down beside us and asked how things had been. We shared the small ritual we had started, our nightly talk, and he listened with a soft look in his eyes. He reached over and squeezed my hand, then looked at Aaron and said, "I'm proud of you, son." It was simple, but it mattered. Sometimes the smallest gestures can change a child's whole world. We also made space for mistakes. There were times I said the wrong thing or tried to fix him too quickly. He would pull back, and I would remind myself to breathe and listen. It was a new kind of patience, one that accepted slow progress over quick fixes. We learned how to ask for forgiveness and how to give it freely. One rainy afternoon, Aaron brought home another drawing. This one showed the same small house but with more windows and lights. People inside, hands reaching out through the panes. Underneath he had written, "Not alone." When he handed it to me, his hands were steady but his voice trembled a little. "I drew this for you," he said. "For us." I held the paper and felt a quiet joy bloom inside me. We taped the drawing on the kitchen wall where we could both see it. Every time I walked by, it reminded me of the slow work of healing and how love sometimes speaks with paper and pencil. We started doing small things together, the kind that build memory more than headlines. We made pancakes on a Sunday morning and laughed when the batter splattered. We walked in the park and talked about nothing important and everything important. He taught me how to use the new app on his tablet, and I told him stories about when phones were big and heavy. These small moments were stitches in a new kind of closeness. One evening, while we were both folding laundry, he said, "Mom, thank you for not giving up on me." I stopped folding and looked at him. "I never would," I said. "You're my son. I'll always be here." He smiled in a way that made my heart settle. It was soft and sure. There were times the old habits tried to sneak back in. I would catch myself putting on a brave face when I felt tired or anxious. Once I tried to hide my worry about a bill, and he noticed. He simply asked, "Are you okay?" And it was enough to remind me to share rather than hide. We were both learning that honesty about fear did not mean burdening the other. It meant trusting them. As months passed, the house began to feel warmer in a new way, not just from the heater in winter, but because of the life inside it. We had softened the edges of our silence. We had created a space where a child's fear could be met with a parent's hand, and where a parent's sadness could be eased by a child's presence. One afternoon, Aaron and I sat at the table and planned a small surprise for my husband's birthday. He leaned over and said, "I want to thank him for being here." I watched him pick out a card and write his note with careful letters. He took time to decorate it with small stars. and when he handed it to me, his face glowed with quiet pride. That night, after my husband opened the card and hugged him, I saw something change again. It was not a single big change, but a string of small ones that joined together. His willingness to share, his ease in our home, his laughter sometimes spilling over. We celebrated with cake and candles, and Aaron's eyes shone bright. When he blew out the candle, he looked at me and mouthed, "Thank you." It was a small, secret conversation between us that said more than words. There were also harder moments, times when we had to sit with grief or disappointment together. A friend moved away and Aaron was sad. I sat with him and let him cry, holding space without trying to fix anything. Sometimes that is the most important thing you can do. Sit and hold the silence until it becomes something softer. As we moved through the months, I began to see that our family was not defined by perfect moments. We were defined by the way we returned to each other, the way we asked for help, the way we forgave, the simple acts of showing up when it mattered. One evening, Aaron came to me with a small book he had made at school about feelings. He handed it to me and said, "I want to show you my favorite part." Inside was a page that read, "It's okay to be scared, it's okay to tell." He looked up and said, "I want everyone to know that." I felt the truth of his words deep in my chest. We learned together that courage is not always loud. Sometimes courage is sitting in a room with someone you love and saying, "I'm scared." Sometimes it is answering back, "I'm scared too, and I'm here." Our home became a place where such small courage was practiced daily. And slowly, the quiet fear that had lived in the corners began to fade. Not completely. Some fears lingered like shadows at dusk, but they no longer controlled the light in our house. We had found a rhythm of care and honesty that fit us. In the kitchen, where we kept the drawing of the safe place, I sometimes catch Aaron looking at it with a soft smile. He will meet my eyes across the room and give a small nod. A tiny sign that says, without words, "We're okay." It is enough. The night everything felt whole again was a simple one. No celebration, no planned moment, just the quiet softness of life moving gently around us. It was late. The house was dim except for the warm yellow light in the hallway. Aaron had finished his homework and brushed his teeth. He walked into my room while I was folding a few clothes on the bed. "Mom?" he said softly. I looked up. "Yes, sweetheart?" He walked closer, holding something behind his back. I smiled, curious but patient. He took a breath, then slowly brought his hands forward. In them was a small piece of paper, folded neatly, carefully, like it held something fragile. "I made this for you," he whispered. My heart warmed instantly. "Can I open it?" He nodded, watching me with quiet anticipation. I unfolded the paper gently. Inside, written in his neat handwriting, were the words, "I feel safe because you're real." There was a small drawing beneath it, 2 figures sitting beside each other on a couch, a window glowing behind them, and a little caption above their heads that read, "Talking time." My eyes stung, but I blinked slowly, letting the emotion settle in my chest rather than spill out too quickly. I looked at him, and he was smiling, a soft, honest smile that came from a place without fear. "Do you like it?" he asked quietly. "I love it," I whispered. "I love you more than anything." He stepped closer and wrapped his arms around me, not the hesitant kind of hug he used to give, but a full, warm hug, the kind that tells you someone has finally let go of the weight they've carried inside for too long. I held him close, feeling his small heartbeat against mine, and realizing that everything we went through, all the silence, all the distance, all the quiet misunderstandings, had brought us to this moment. A moment of truth, a moment of healing, a moment of realness. We stayed like that for a long time, until he finally pulled away with a sleepy smile and said he wanted to go to bed. I tucked him in, pulled the blanket up to his chest, smoothed his hair back gently, and kissed his forehead. "Good night, Mom," he whispered. "Good night, my love," I replied. As I turned off his lamp, he called softly, "Mom?" "Yes? Thanks for being real with me." My throat tightened in the best way. "Thank you for letting me be real with you," I said. He nodded once, closed his eyes, and drifted into sleep, a soft reflection. Later that night, I walked into the kitchen and looked at the drawing he made weeks earlier. The small house with the glowing window labeled "The Safe Place." Beside it now hung the new paper, the one that said, "I feel safe because you're real." I stood there in the quiet, the hum of the refrigerator filling the space, and felt a deep warmth spread through me. I had spent so many years trying to be strong, trying to hide my sadness, trying to make motherhood look effortless, so he would feel secure, but in the end, the thing that helped him the most was not my strength, it was my softness, my honesty, my realness. It wasn't the perfect days that healed him. It was the gentle ones, the honest conversations, the slow evenings sitting together, the willingness to say, "I feel scared too." I realized then that children don't need perfect parents. They need present parents. They need real parents. Parents who show up, even with shaky hands. Parents who listen, even when the words are hard. Parents who allow themselves to be human. And in that moment, I felt grateful for the fears, for the mistakes, for the rebuilding, for the quiet courage we learned together. The final thought. If I had to leave one message for anyone listening to this story, any parent, any child, any heart carrying silent worries, it would be this. Love doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes the softest words are the ones that stay forever, and sometimes the smallest moment, a note, a whisper, a hug, can melt a heart and change a life. As I turned off the kitchen light that night, I whispered to myself, "We're okay now and we'll keep being okay, one honest moment at a time." And in the quiet of our home, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. A steady, peaceful certainty that love, when it is real and gentle, always finds its way back.